Alright, interesting project today. Today, we're going to be working on taking the intake and exhaust off from a 1954 Ford Mainline. This is a cool car that I'm working on for a friend of mine. It needs a little bit of work to get going. It runs and drives really well. It does have a fuel leak. It does have some bad wiring spots. I'll show you a couple of them if I can. Like, there's a bunch of bare wires there on the coil, which we're going to get rid of. We're going to rewire it. It's the old, like, cloth wrap style wiring. Some of the stuff doesn't really matter if that's the case. You know, some of the older headlight stuff and whatever won't matter. But it's going to matter on stuff like the coil and whatever. If it shorts out, it won't run right. So we're going to get that all cleaned up. But first we're going to take the carburetor off. I'm going to set you up right here and do a little bit of work and try to get that carburetor off, and then we'll get to taking the intake and exhaust off. I'll show you that. But right now you're pointing at the carburetor, so we'll get to working on that. Alright, first things first is we got to get all these adapters off here. All the fuel lines, vacuum lines, all that stuff's got to come off in order to get this thing out of here. This one's the fuel line. This carburetor is awful cool. It's an old Holly, original 1 barrel. It is quite the awesome thing. All this stuff is really cool. Everything on this thing is standard. No metric here. It's awful funny, me being such a young kid working on a pretty old car. It's awful interesting. Nobody thinks about that kind of stuff. But I really like old cars. Everything on this is standard thread. I also personally own a 1954 F600, which is about the coolest truck you've ever seen. All original, numbers matching engine. Everything runs as it should. It does need some transmission work right now, but we'll be getting to that. Only problem working backwards. Oh, fucked it. Wrong screwdriver. Alright, so there's not a whole lot to these. They are pretty simple. This is just a choke cable. There's not a whole lot to these older things. So I'm going to bring you back to when this carburetor is off. All there is that linkage down there, which is the throttle, and 3 small little bolts. And then I'll have it off and on the bench, and I'll drain it off into a pan. I'll bring it back. Let's see around the one barrel, and then we'll get to removing the intake and exhaust manifold, which on this thing is all in one. It's inline 6. Alright, so carburetor's off. This is a nifty, cool little carburetor. It has a glass float bowl on it so you can see the fuel. It's just a little guy, a little 1 barrel carburetor. Just a little guy, not even 2 barrel. But this new style gas and this stuff is horrible. This is what ethanol does to all these nice little cork gaskets that come on these older carburetors. It just turns it into gunk. It leaks out of all the screws and whatnot. So let's show you this. There's a little gasket behind that screw there, and it leaks out of that. Yeah, this ethanol gas stuff is just horrible on these old cars. So I got a kit coming from Standard Motor Products. Comes with updated gaskets and stuff, and we'll get this thing rebuilt and get it all fixed up. So now what we need to do is we got the carburetor off, so now you can see the intake. The intake bolts to the exhaust, which is kind of interesting on these things. So we'll get all these things apart and get this intake and exhaust off, and we'll come back once we get it off. The reason we're taking this all apart is because I believe there's a crack on the exhaust manifold that's causing some exhaust to get into the car and making it hard to drive without, you know, getting headaches and stuff like that. So, alright, I'll get this off. It's pretty straightforward. They bolt together. The intake and the exhaust manifold are one gasket that just goes all the way across. So you just remove all the bolts and they'll come apart. So I'll get this all apart and they'll come back. Alright, so we got the exhaust manifold off, and for the love of God, people, do not use silicone. Buy the right gasket. I know these original ones come with these cups that sit in there to locate whatever and whatnot, and we can reuse those, but do not use the old rings in silicone. It doesn't hold, it expands weird, it burns out. Just don't do it. So this is my kid. He came back from school. Hi. He's watching me fix this car, and he has spotted a pretty bad concern, which is originally why we took it off the car.
Yeah.
This exhaust manifold is cracked everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not driving that down the road without getting a massive headache. It's cracked all along there. It's cracked all along underneath here. It's pretty much cracked everywhere. And matter of fact, it's also cracked the intake manifold in a couple spots. That we'll have to adjust later. I'm not sure. So I'll have to figure out if that's aluminum or cast. But it's also broke. So
yes, it's more broke than anything.
Yeah. So we're just cleaning this up, and then we're going to try to TIG weld this. Now this is going to take quite a while because you cannot get these things super hot, or else the cracks will just go everywhere and this thing will be junk. And you cannot find an exhaust manifold gasket for a 1954 Ford Mainline with a straight 6. Everybody thinks that every straight 6 is a 300 straight 6, and that's not the case.
No.
Never. So we're going to try to weld this up, and we'll see what the progress, if we get any progress on all these cracks. Well, one weld down, 7,085 more to go. The only thing that sucks about cast iron is that it's a legit weld one thing, let it rest for 10-15 minutes until it's cool enough to where you can touch it. If not, these cracks will go everywhere and blow big chunks out. Worst thing is if you get all done and you hear a big pop. That is a bad sign. So this one's cool enough. He'll weld another one probably. Try to get this one this next big hole all the way welded across and whatever, and get this one all welded up. Alright, just want to show you the progress or whatever else. There's like one more small crack up in there that I gotta finish, and then there's other parts of this thing. So this takes an extremely long time to do. So I'm going to put this into two parts. This will be the end of part one. The exhaust manifold's off, the carburetor's off the car. I'm waiting for a rebuild kit for that so I can fix all that. The intake's off. I've also noticed that there seems to be a decent size crack in that also, which means that'll have to get fixed. Hopefully that's a thick enough spot where it won't be too bad. I thought it was aluminum. It's not. It's magnetic, so it's the same kind of cast, whatever. So we'll grind that out same way as we did the cast. And that's just the one spot, so we'll try to weld that up. That's not a super huge problem on this. Essentially all that is a spot for heat for the from the exhaust manifold. So it bolts on the top of that exhaust manifold up here, and heat from the exhaust warms up the intake and just makes it easier for to run everywhere else. But it technically really doesn't need that. Your new cars run on coolant. They actually want it rather to run a cooler. So we'll get rid of that, or well, we'll weld that up and not have to worry about that too much. Alright, so this is the end of part one. I'll finish up the welding and stuff, and we'll get to, I'll make it look a little bit prettier before we record again, and we'll get to part two when hopefully some more parts come, and we'll rebuild the carb and get this all bolted back on the car, and hopefully no more exhaust leaks and no more problems with getting possible carbon monoxide poisoning while driving the car. It's a really nice car to drive. It's a 3 on the tree, which is just cool. Car runs like a sewing machine, even with all the cracks and stuff in the intake and exhaust. But we'll get that all figured out and straightened around and all set and ready to go. So we'll catch you back later on after we get some parts and some more welding's done. I estimate this will probably take about the whole rest of the night, probably somewhere in the realm of about 6 hours or so worth of doing a little bit of welding, or heating it up, doing a little bit of welding, and then letting it cool down so that it doesn't cause more cracks in this already very brittle exhaust manifold, because I cannot find a new one. Looked over online, eBay, all over the place, and nobody seems to have this exhaust manifold. So trying to do the best I can to save this for this guy. It's his first car, so you know, a little bit of sentimental value in it. It's not really worth a super lot, but it's a cool little car, and so we're gonna try to help this guy out. So Alright, we'll let this cool down and I'll do more work and we'll get back to it later on. I hope you enjoyed part 1.